Good evening. Welcome to our pre-agenda meeting tonight. We're going to begin with, the meeting will now come to order, and Alderman Muhammad is going to do our invocation.
At this time, with all hearts and mind clear, we're going to pray. We thank you, Lord, for allowing us to come together this evening to discuss the business of the town of Spencer, and please give us the guidance and wisdom to do as such. We're thankful for the residents that are here present and the rest of the residents in the community as well. And we're also thankful for the staff and the department heads that are doing such a wonderful job here. In your name, Lord, I hope that you bless our meeting to be very successful. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Muhammad. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. We're going to begin tonight with a public hearing to obtain public comment on the town's comprehensive land use plan. Do you need to say something, Mr. Blunt, first?
You know, I'll never turn down an opportunity to say something.
We love to hear you.
Actually, for each of the public hearings, I have the original presentations available, the PowerPoint presentations I made to you, but I'm not planning to go through them completely. If you need to see something from those presentations, I'll be glad to pull it up. He's got it on the computer. If not, we'll save that for your Thursday meeting and talk about it then. I would, if you give me just a second, though. It dawned on me last night as I sat and pondered things at the magistrate's office, which I often do. If we can get that PowerPoint up, the computer's going to work tonight. There we go. Let's see if the buttons are all working here. I was thinking last night about decision making and what y'all go through sitting behind those, or behind the dais in those chairs, and what a puzzle it is sometimes trying to make decisions. And what an amazing thing it is for a small town like Spencer to have some big issues coming to a head all at one time. And things a little small to see, but this is very quick, so don't get afraid I'm going to keep you here for very long. But individual pieces of the puzzle don't make much sense when you look at them just a single piece at a time. And he's back there frowning and shaking his head. There's the next slide. Well, that's actually one slide. Looking at all the pieces together, when you open that box and dump them on your table, usually you don't see much there that tells you what you ought to do, give you much direction. So you scatter them out, get them into little smaller piles, and start trying to recognize patterns and trends and things that will help you put that puzzle together and make a decision. And then when you get down towards the end, that last piece seems pretty obvious. And you know exactly where it goes and what it's going to do. And if you follow through that process, you end up with a pretty picture. It's a puzzle that I picked off the internet, small town. So you end up with something beautiful by going through that decision-making process. Tonight you're going to hear presentations and public comments on two big issues. One's the comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive planning process, as I was thinking about it last night, is sort of like putting together a puzzle. When you first dump that box out, you got a lot of stuff there. Some of it doesn't make sense, and you don't see exactly how it's going to all fit together. The comprehensive planning process that we've gone through is the part of separating it out into separate piles and figuring out where the pieces most likely go and how they fit together. You're looking at something else tonight, the restriping project, and that's just one piece of the puzzle. And sometimes, as I showed you in those earlier ones, you don't know exactly where that piece falls, how important it is what it's going to do, what it's not going to do. But if you leave it out, that's what your final puzzle looks like. If you just decide that that piece isn't important and you put together your puzzle without a few pieces, the final product's not nearly as pretty. So I encourage you tonight to think about both of those issues, comprehensive plan and the restriping project, as really similar hand-in-hand projects. The two go hand in hand. And a lot of the other decisions you'll be making in the coming months also do that. If you don't get all the pieces approved, the final product's not going to look nearly as pretty as it can. So that's my PowerPoint for the night.
Thank you very much.
The comprehensive plan, as you know, is very important. It is the basic plan that we use to justify all other land use decisions we make. I will tell you that, as I've emphasized along the way, the planning police aren't going to come down here and tell us we're in trouble if we don't adopt these amendments. But the deadline for actually adopting a current plan is July 1st. So we need to go ahead and adopt something, or we run the risk of being challenged in court on some future decision and somebody saying, hey, Spencer didn't have a current plan. If we adopt something tonight, we'll have a current plan and we'll be legally defensible. So I'll leave it at that. If you have any questions after your public hearing, I'll be glad to answer.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone that wishes to speak to this issue in the public hearing? Is there a...
Whatever you want to say.
Whatever, I mean, whichever way you want to go. We're starting with the first one is the town comprehensive land use plan. Is there anyone that wishes to speak either for or against that? We're limited to 3 minutes. Okay. Now that I don't know. No problem. Yes, ma'am. No, we're going to do comments now for this public hearing. We've got three separate hearings. Yes, ma'am. Steve, I'll let you address that.
The plan is, for this particular issue, the comprehensive plan is available online on the web. Advertised in the paper that we would provide people with hard copy. It has been presented to the board at a prior meeting. So we're not planning to go through the full presentation process tonight, but if you have specific questions, I'll be glad to address.
And just to clarify, we did present this publicly a month ago and have put it out there, and we're now inviting feedback based on what was already presented.
So,
Are there any other questions?
Okay, thank you.
We don't vote until Tuesday.
Right. At your meeting Tuesday.
Yeah, we will be voting on.
And again, we have the presentations available. If for some reason you as a board want to hear that presentation again, I'll be glad to queue it up and go through it again. It was in your package, so you've got a hard copy of it you can review. And Susan, anytime if you're interested in one of these issues, we usually post them several weeks ahead of time. And all you got to do is walk into the desk. For tonight.
Mr. Bunt, would it be of value just to hit the high points of some of the speakers?
I think that'd be.
There'll be comprehensive plan.
Maybe it's
I'll go through it very quickly. Yeah, but that's the best way for me to do it, is to go through it that way, so I keep my mind organized.
Appreciate that.
Otherwise, I drift off somewhere.
cool.
And I will point out, as to go through it, from the presentation at your last meeting, where certain things were pointed out as being probably not a good idea, I have made corrections. So those have already been incorporated into it. So comprehensive plan. This is an update of our 2008 comprehensive plan. You can see the original table of contents. The planning board went through that section by section, trying to determine what areas needed to be corrected, what areas were still okay. Some of this has to do with types of soil, our road system, location of schools, etc. Those things didn't change. So there were only certain sections that we needed to go through and review. Basically, section 5 and 6, which are the vision and land use development concept and goals and implementation strategy. That's the two sections we focused on. During this process, we did determine that there were some strategic properties in the town that needed special attention, possibly quicker attention than we would think of. These are listed on this slide: the North Carolina Finishing property, the Fisher Lamb property, the Sowers Farm property, and the Center for Urban Forest site, which is part of the Standback Forest. I pointed out in the last meeting that almost quicker than we can get this stuff on paper and before you in presentation form, these things are moving ahead quickly. The Fisher Lamb site, I talk to that developer probably 4 times a week with questions, details. So that area is going to develop regardless of what we do with our comprehensive plan. So hopefully we can get some stuff in place planning-wise to help you make decisions. The strategic corridors are fairly easy to discern. The downtown area is always important. Salisbury Avenue from 17th Street to Longs Ferry is part of what you're gathering public input on tonight. Then in the future, Salisbury Avenue from Longs Ferry to the river will become important. It's already important, but it will develop very quickly. Longs Ferry Road is the town's primary connector to I-85. And again, there's already tremendous development pressure there. We're working in conjunction with the county for a charter study on that already, and we're looking at starting what's called a small area plan for that area. Hackett Street is the current access to areas north of Longs Ferry. We are looking at creating a service road between the two so that commercial traffic doesn't have to go through residential areas. There's a large amount of industrial property north of Longs Ferry and really some south of Longs Ferry that needs attention as to how it's going to be developed. The Hawkinstown Road area, we get an amazing number of contacts for people interested in developing individual properties in that area. We'd like to see some folks think about combining some of those properties and developing larger developments, coordinated development. And then the Sowers Ferry Road area has some large undeveloped tracts that could be developed into some very nice residential areas. This was the 2008 Comprehensive Plan Land Use Strategy Map. And if you compare it to your zoning map, it looks pretty familiar. And that's as it should be. Your zoning map should, to some degree, reflect what your strategy map reflects. But we found some stuff as we looked at the details that we think, again, needs more attention, more quick attention. The riverfront property at North Carolina Finishing Company, again, we're already in meetings with the property owner. We're already talking about strategies for seeing that develop. The small area between the North Carolina Finishing property and the rest of the 29 corridor. There's a section that's not in the town's ETJ for a variety of reasons. It needs to be. We need to control zoning and subdivision in an area. Again, the county and Spencer are already talking about that process. And then the strip of properties actually owned Salisbury Avenue or 29, currently owned and zoned industrial. In our opinion, it probably needs to be changed to a commercial zoning classification. There's a large area that's zoned AG, which sounds like it's agricultural, but really it's a large lot residential. It's 2 acre minimum for a home to be built on. We think that should be a higher density development category. And again, the area around the Hawkinstown Loop, we would suggest that those areas be consolidated into larger lots. I could go through these for a length of time, but I don't want to keep you here too long. These are various areas that we found that deserve attention. And we went through section 6, looking at the goals and strategy, did a reality check on some of those. In your written material, it shows you our suggestions on that. And then we came up with some new development policies. And when this is presented to you next week, we'll actually have it in ordinance form for you ready to look exactly at what you're going to adopt, not just a presentation. So that was actually the old presentation. I told you there were some updates. That one didn't show those. But it gives you a flavor of what we're trying to do with comprehensive plan. Trying to update it, not redoing it the whole thing, but just update it so it's current enough to be used. Anything else?
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, Mr. Gobble.
Jim Gobble, 609 8th Street, Spencer. And I am in favor of going forward with the enhancements that Mr. Blunt is talking about. I think it would do nothing but help this town move forward. So hopefully the Alderman will see it that way and vote in favor of the improvements that he's made to the 208 land use plan. I was on that planning board in 2008. It's a lot of time that's elapsed between 2008 and now. A lot of things have changed, and obviously he's done a lot of work to make improvements and get things going in the right direction. So I would encourage you to vote in favor.
Thank you, Mr. Gobble. Any other public comments? Any written comments concerning this case? Is there a motion to close this public? Okay, all in favor? Okay, we'll now go to our next public hearing, which deals with restriping of Salisbury Avenue.
Thank you. And again, we have a slightly updated PowerPoint presentation. I've also had these maps produced in larger format so that the public can see. If they walk up and look at it, they'll see exactly what the cross section of the road at any point along the road will be. This project came about because NCDOT periodically repaves the road. And when they do, they have to restripe it. And they came out with their Smart or Complete Streets program many years ago, 2012, I believe it was. And part of that plan was for NCDOT staff to recognize that there were multiple users of highway corridors, and therefore not just to think of corridors from the point of view of the automobile driver, but to start to integrate other forms of transportation and use of those corridors, which includes bike lanes and sidewalks. So using that concept, we are working with NCDOT to actually reconfigure the lanes from 17th Street to Long Ferry, which is the project they're looking at for late this year, early 2023, to change what's there now, which is 2 traffic lanes in each direction, to a single lane of traffic in each direction, center turn lane, dedicated center turn lane through the whole corridor, and then bike lanes on either side. The existing parking along that route will stay as it is, the diagonal parking out here and down further. We feel, and I've given you the board, we heard there might be some objection to this, so I created a frequently asked questions. And that's a little bit of a misnomer because nobody's asked me any questions. Nobody's contacted me to say they're against it or for it, or that they have concerns or questions. So I guess what the questions might have been and gave you all the answers to those. Alderman Morgan certainly spoke up against it at the last meeting. Some of his concerns are answered in these frequently asked question answers. One of his most pertinent questions had to do with access to the Transportation Museum during their events. In your package and in the revised slideshow that was online, it shows a way to use the bike lane as a dedicated right turn for northbound traffic into those events, and then use the dedicated center left turn lane for people coming south, and that would keep 2 lanes of traffic, or 1 lane of traffic each direction, open. So with a few cones and a few directions, maybe a sign on the side of the road saying event traffic right-hand lane, you solve that problem. And that's what we attempt to do. As problems are identified or concerns are identified, we try to address each and every one of those. Mr. Morgan also pointed out that he had heard from numerous store owners in downtown Salisbury that didn't like it, that it hurt their business. We contacted Chamber of Commerce, Merchant Association, Salisbury's traffic engineer, Salisbury's planner, a few other people. The response we got back was yes, there were some concerns prior to implementation. There were some concerns as it was being implemented, but that since it's been in place, they've had no complaints and no problems. And that means the store owners aren't down at Salisbury City Hall complaining about it. They would be if it was a problem. I travel that route probably every day, and just anecdotally, the left-hand turn lane solves a lot of problems. Same problems we have out here. When somebody stops to make a left-hand turn, it stops a lane of traffic. As you see in the, I believe it's in the frequently asked questions document I sent you, there have been studies done that show that the proposed restriping configuration is safer than the 4 lanes. I showed you in the PowerPoint presentation that it can effectively be a good traffic calming situation, that it will take what is now a drag strip and turn it into a city street again. As we were addressing all these issues, we kept hearing the concept of road versus street. And I sent you a link to something called a strode, which sounds like toad, which makes you think of that as a bad thing. And it really is a bad thing when you take what used to be a road and you try to use it for both a street and a road. And obviously a road is something more like I-85, or maybe what 29 was 50 years ago, when it was a connector and a main traffic artery through this region. It's not that anymore. It's not going to ever be that again. I-85 did away with that. Now it's a street. It's an urban street. There's a lot of commercial development along it as an urban street. And this configuration will better serve those users of that road. This, you can look up a lot of studies across the nation where this has been done. It's called a road diet, where you do away with traffic lanes. In this case, it's been tested. Start at 17th Street and go south, and you see exactly what we want to do, and you can see if there's any problems that are obvious to the configuration. The only problem I've heard anybody talk about is that it slowed down traffic. And that means that people that would like to be going 45 miles an hour down through there can't do it anymore, because 35 miles an hour is the speed limit. That's what they're supposed to be going. They're used to going 45. Now they pretty much have to go 35. So that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. They may complain about it, but it's really a good thing. You've got a 20 mile an hour speed limit through the core of downtown, but I think we all know that when you do 20 miles an hour through there, it feels like you're walking. The implied speed limit, what feels like you should be driving, is more like 45, 50 miles an hour, and that's what some people drive through there. And that creates a problem. That creates a danger to your citizens. The road diet and the bike lanes will help solve that. So this is something that's a once every 20, 25 year opportunity for DOT to bear the brunt of the cost of this, not the town. They are going to have to restripe it one way or the other. So to restripe it as we've suggested they restripe it really doesn't cost much more money than putting back 4 lanes of traffic. I can go on and on. I feel passionately about this one. Again, my little presentation before, this is a piece of the puzzle. And it may not seem like an important piece of the puzzle, but leave it out and see what the puzzle looks like when you get finished. You'll still have that drag strip out there. You'll still have that bare road look out there. And that's not what Spencer wants to do. It wants to be something better than that. This reconfiguration will help you do it. But I won't go through the PowerPoint unless somebody wants to do it. Okay? I will point out that the person who made the motion to adopt this or recommend this to you from the planning board was our very own Pinocchio's owner, who has a business on Salisbury Avenue. He thinks it's important enough to have those bike lanes out there that he thinks it's great for his business to make this change. Good enough that he voted in favor of it. He made the motion to approve. So if you want to find out how people feel about it, talk to them. Talk to those folks. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Okay, we do have some people who are signed up to make comments during this. Reminder that you're limited to 3 minutes. And Stacey, do you let them know you will get those? Oh, okay, thanks. Okay, good. I forgot about it. Okay, first up, Philip McCorkle, speaking on the restriping issue. Good evening, Mr. McCorkle.
I'm on the north end of Salisbury Avenue. Hendricks Barbecue at lunch. In the right-hand lane, people are parked, waiting to go through the sign. If you put the bike lane there, you got a solid yellow line, intermediate yellow line. Legally, you cannot go around them and pass in that turn lane. And right here is what I'm talking about. There'd be a big traffic problem at Hendricks at lunchtime. And if you've been to Hendricks at lunchtime, you know how busy they are. And especially, I'm a member of Ellis Fire Department. You driving a fire truck, the nursing home down there, they go down there, what, 2 times a day, most of the time? You get to Hendricks, what the fire truck gonna do is he goes around and you got people trying to go around other traffic. You're gonna have a traffic jam when there's a light.
Thank you, Mr. Okay, Mrs. Dan.
It's not typically part of the
Not
process.
during public comment. Thank you, Mrs. McCorkle, for coming. Good to see you. My concern is, I've lived there for 1940.
we've got a road behind our house. It used to be an alley, but now it's a road. Like Avenue. People go up and down that back way. They do all this to the street. How are they gonna lead all of them cars and everything? And I don't like it. How many people here live on Salisbury Avenue? They don't know how to the traffic and all is on Salisbury Avenue and talk about two lanes and turning lanes. I don't go along with it.
Thank you, Ms. McCoy. Jim Monster. I'm pronouncing that correctly. Mose. I couldn't remember.
Jim Mosier, live at 121 Fifth Street and own two businesses there. I'm going to be speaking for my wife because she's teaching people. We are definitely for the bike lane. I feel that we've been doing really great things here with this town, moving forward and bringing the town into the future. And the group of people that have the money to spend right now are the millennials. They're the ones who are buying homes, coming into our town. In fact, we have 10 new families that have moved to this town that take lessons from the school. And if you look after study, millennials want bike lanes, they want parks, they want houses with small yards, because they like to be outside and outdoors and so forth. So I like Mr. Blunt said, I think it's an incredibly important piece of the puzzle to get rid of the drag strip out there. We live upstairs, so we see everything that goes on at night. People just fly down that road constantly, even during the day. And the police can't be there, 24/7 seeing everything on that road. And I think it would help slow the traffic and also allow businesses to have more business of people who ride bikes and so forth. I would ride a bike if there was a bike lane, especially at $5.50 a gallon. So I'd like to see it. My wife and I are in favor for it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from the audience? Ms. Nance?
Hello and good evening. And I would just like to say that I'm definitely in favor of the new restriping plan. My office is located at 306 North Salisbury Avenue or South Salisbury Avenue. And honestly, I feel like I'm going to be run over every day that when I try to pull in, if I'm getting anything out of the trunk of the car, honest to goodness, those spaces, and I realize cars are bigger than they used to be. And, I grew up on North Salisbury Avenue at 115. And so I know that the traffic, the different patterns and how they can be. And I think that addressing this issue now by restriping is going to make a complete difference to people's safety, that especially in this block, where Pinocchio's is, because I am telling you, the cars fly by. And if I'm trying to back out or load stuff in my car, I honestly fear for my safety. So I appreciate that you guys are all taking a look into correcting that action, and I hope there can be something that will include something for the McCorkles. Salisbury Avenue is a long, big road, and so I'm sure there's something that everybody can come up with that will work for the whole town. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from the audience? Mr. Robert?
I would like to touch on the traffic calming effect. And this is something we definitely need in this town. A 4-lane road creates speed. We're starting to develop here in this town now. We're getting some new shops that are being recruited in the shopping center. The Nancy's are working on that, and I'm hearing we'll get a new restaurant. And as time goes along, if we can calm the traffic and bike lanes would be a tool that would help calm this traffic. It's very fast out there. And people would slow down and see what we have to offer. Give them time to look at things, you know. And if people talk about traffic, and corporals, good people, I understand their thoughts. Like Ms. Nance said, maybe that end of Salisbury Avenue, out of the business district, maybe there can be something worked out to help businesses down that way and residents down that way. But yes, and also what Mr. Mosier said, the millennial generation, what he touched on, their wants and needs, what they look at before they move into a community. He's exactly right. They like walking trails. They like parks. They like bike lanes. So in order for us to get in to where we need to be, this new century, the new world, the new age world, I call it a lot of times, we need to go forward with that. And Steve, Mr. Blunt called it parts of the puzzle. I always called it connecting the dots. You gotta don't leave a blank. You gotta keep connecting your dots or filling the puzzle pieces. So yes, I think it would be a plus for the town of Spencer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dobb. Anyone else from the audience that wishes to speak? Okay, Clerk Hagan, I think we have some written.
Town of Spencer. I am submitting my opinion as to the proposed road configuration from 17th Street to the Long Ferry Road. This is not a good idea. Bike lanes are not, I'm sorry, this one's written in cursive, so I apologize. Bike lanes are not, I'm not sure what that word is, but never see anyone riding a bike in Spencer. Think about what impact this would be for the train museum. Very confusing, and one lane is ridiculous. Hurts businesses, Food Lion, Hendrix, Barbecue. Not a good choice and not a good idea in general. This town needs more than a bike lane to slow down traffic. I've never seen anyone riding a bike from North Main to Salisbury Avenue. Money should be spent on cleaning up properties, etc. And this was from a concern. Okay. The Bates family of the corner of 1615 South Salisbury Avenue. We are not in favor to request to restripe the street. Too many big trucks come through to change to two lanes, like in Salisbury. The traffic coming from Salisbury wait until they get to Spencer to get to use two lanes. The money should be used to fix, repair, and restore streets, but not to change the street. So again, a no to restriping to one lane. Board of Aldermen. My name is Amy Ray. I am a resident and business owner in Spencer. I also serve as chair of the Community Appearance Commission for the town of Spencer. I am writing this letter as a matter of public comment to weigh in on the restriping proposal for downtown Spencer. I write this letter in support of shifting to a two-lane road with bicycle lanes. I feel that this will make our downtown area safer to promote more walkability, thus adding staying power to people who not only visit our town but reside here. This also will add a safety measure for the growing number of cyclists, making it a more pleasurable experience riding through our beautiful town. Restriping will also impact our business in a positive way, as traffic calming allows people to be more aware of what they are passing as they go through downtown, thus making them more inclined to stop and stay a while. There are many other larger cities in North Carolina that have two lanes going through their downtown areas successfully, and I feel that Spencer can absolutely follow suit. Traffic calming has a range of proven benefits, including but not limited to speed reduction, reduced traffic noise, improved air quality, improved street aesthetics, increased neighborhood interaction, and increased property values. Spencer has the unique opportunity to become and remain a very walkable town. Walking is amongst one of the heaviest and most environmentally friendly activities and way of travel. According to the NCDOT, statistics show that more than 3,000 pedestrians are hit each year, with approximately 160 of those being fatalities. Having a transportation museum is very beneficial to our town, having had 158,872 visitors in 2019. This represents a huge economic impact for Rowan County. Many of these visitors park within our downtown area, thus having to walk across 4 lanes to reach the museum and then back across them again. Imagine if there were only 2 lanes with added bicycle lanes, how much safer it would be to cross, and perhaps how likely it would be that visitors would stay after their visit and explore our downtown area if there was more walkability to our town. This would also benefit the people who reside here, as it would be safer walking through town, thus increasing our own staying power and promoting profitability within our downtown businesses. Cycling has been gaining interest and has been on the rise in recent years. During the pandemic, many took to the sport or activity as a healthier way to travel. Cycling promotes decreased stress levels, increased cardiovascular health, improved joint mobility, decreased emissions and air pollutants, as well as decreasing noise pollution. In 2016, 12.4% of Americans cycled on a regular basis. This number has increased from around 43 million to 47.5 million in the past 3 years. According to the NCDOT, the risks to cyclists in North Carolina are higher than almost anywhere else. Statistics show that vehicles in North Carolina have hit more than 850 cyclists each year in vehicular accidents. Spencer has the opportunity to incorporate a safer way to travel through our town as we continue to grow. Implementing this in the early stages of town growth will promote healthier and cleaner ways to travel, as well as increasing the number of cyclists that travel through our town. The economic effects of traffic calming and street improvements would benefit not only my business but other existing and new businesses in Spencer. Attractive and better designed streets are not simply aesthetic and safer. They attract more people and more activity. This would help improve the economic impact and vitality that we are looking for in Spencer. Studies show that when people stay in a place for a longer amount of time, they spend more money, making our town and downtown area a more desirable place to be. More attractive and safer would make people want to stay for longer. More people, more customers would give us the benefit of changing our business model to increase sales and revenue. Examples of this would include adding lunch service and expanding our dinner hours. We are currently working on outdoor seating as well. Future plans are to renovate our upstairs for more dining opportunities, but we need people to be here, to stay here when they visit, to make this a feasible business adjustment. We certainly need staying power for Spencer to be able to grow. I feel that implementing traffic calming by shifting to a 2-lane road with bicycle lanes is a great start to this, especially while Spencer is still in the early stages of this new growth. This traffic calming would provide pedestrian safety, increase cyclist activity, and economic growth. Thank you for your time and consideration. Sincerely, Amy. This email is to express public support for the proposed restriping of Salisbury Avenue. Although we are citizens of Salisbury, my wife and I ride bicycles to the Yadkin River Park via Salisbury Avenue. I am a very experienced bicyclist and feel comfortable riding on either lane configuration. However, my wife is a casual bicyclist and would feel much more comfortable riding on the proposed 3-lane cross section with bike lanes. Making this sort of low-cost accommodation for bicycles will result in more citizens being interested in bicycling. We have traveled South Main Street, Salisbury, nearly every day for the past 18 years. The conversion of South Main Street from 4 lanes to a proposed 3-lane cross section with bicycle lanes was simple and is considered a welcome improvement by our family. I believe that the town of Spencer would be pleased with the proposed restriping. Sincerely, Dan Nicholson, 604 Anderson Avenue, Salisbury. My name is Karen Frazier. I reside at 201 North Salisbury Avenue in Spencer. I support the proposed road configuration change to allow 1 car lane in each direction, a turn lane in the middle, and bike lane on either side for Salisbury Avenue. My support is in my own interest of desiring a slowing down of traffic in front of my house. It will require an adjustment to sometimes have to use the turn lane to exit East Newton on to Salisbury Avenue, but well worth the adjustment. My reasons for supporting this change may be in my self-interest, but as a citizen of Spencer, I believe the change will also benefit the town for the reasons stated in the proposal of connecting community health benefits and positive economic and environmental benefits. I fully support this.
Okay, any further comments from the audience? Is there a motion to close this hearing?
Move to close the hearing.
Second? Second. All in favor? Okay. We will now move to public hearing. The next one is on the town's development ordinance modifying section 2.22. Blunt?
I bet you don't get any speakers on this one, so this will be nice and quick. I will comment before I move on that it's nice to hear a citizen identify a problem, which is Hendricks. And I go there once or twice a week, and you can tell that I go there. And traffic does get out in the street. And that's a problem that needs to be solved, whether this road is restriped or not. So we need to work with Hendricks to get that problem solved. That should not stop you from approving the bike lane. Just want to make that editorial comment. This particular one, section 2.22, has to do with murals on walls in the town of Spencer. This is a part of your new development ordinance. When Sky and Kyle came up with the great idea of restoring the old murals and putting up some new murals, I went back and looked at our ordinance and sent Sky a copy. And pretty soon, Sky and I think it was Joe actually came and knocked on my door and said, "We need to talk to you about this." And it turned out our current ordinance was going to prevent them from doing some of the murals that they wanted to do. So we discussed various ways to adjust the language. What we've come up with is a very simple amendment to the current ordinance language that basically allows you as a board to determine where these murals can be put. It doesn't say that they can't be put. In fact, the old ordinance said they couldn't be put on Main Street, where the Main Street happens. Couldn't find that on the map. So that's the problem with adopting ordinances. Sometimes the old language gets carried over from some other town. But in this case, I'm assuming Main Street was Salisbury Avenue. There's a few of the murals that could not be put up because they face Salisbury Avenue. So this text amendment is very simple. It gives y'all the authority to either make decisions or appoint a body to make those decisions on where these murals can be put. Very simple, nothing complicated about it.
Thank you very much. Are there any public comments in reference to this? Any written?
No.
Is there a motion to close this public hearing?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Second? Thank you. Alderman Pegg. All in favor? Okay, that section is closed. And I want to thank all of you who came forward to speak and to write. We really appreciate citizen input, and we will weigh everything you said very carefully before we vote on this. Thank you very much. Okay, we are now at item number 6, board to consider receiving a presentation from staff on the Historic Preservation Commission standards update.
All right, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Harris.
So this item is to receive a presentation concerning the Historic Preservation Commission's proposal to repeal and replace the Spencer Historic District. I do want to say that it is an honor for me to come up here and give you this presentation. The HPC has been working diligently for many months on this project. They've been conducting many special meetings, meeting twice per month, sometimes more, sometimes late into the night, to bring this project forward. So what you have before you is a draft of new standards that would apply within the historic district. I wanted to kind of go back to what Mr. Blunt was talking about. He mentioned that as the town grows, we have a number of different puzzle pieces coming together to facilitate us moving forward. The comprehensive plan, the restriping project, and then other projects throughout the town, the parks, the trails, and forgive me for being a little egotistic, but I do think that the Historic Preservation Commission standards update is an integral puzzle piece in making sure that standards across the town are improved. I know one of the things that the mayor and the town manager talk about is facilitating Spencer becoming a model small town, and I think that our historic resources are a very important part of Spencer's history as well as its future. One of the things that small towns need to do, because we have limited resources, is leverage what we have. And our historic resources are some of our most valuable resources. We have a historic district, which is the largest contiguous historic district in North Carolina. And so we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to leverage our historic resources so that we get the most value that we can out of them with the least possible public dollars spent. I will note that this is the first time I'm presenting this project formally to the Board of Aldermen. This has not gone through a public hearing process. The drafts are not yet available on the town website. And so moving forward, we will have additional opportunities to ensure that this proposal is appropriately reviewed. But just to make sure in the audience that they know that this is the first time y'all are hearing about this in great. The last thing I will say before I get into the bulk of my presentation is that I had the opportunity to preview the town summer newsletter, and in the mayor's introductory remarks, he talks about how appearances matter, and that for the town of Spencer, we're making great strides in improving the quality of life and the standards across town. And I believe that updating the standards that apply in our historic district are going to be integral in improving those standards across the town. So y'all all have previously had access to the memorandum that I drafted. Could I get a quick review? How many of you had the opportunity to read the full memorandum? So what I'll do, my presentation will track fairly closely to the language of the memo. What I wanted to communicate is pretty clearly laid out in the memo, and I want to just go through that now. So I realize I'm the last presentation y'all are giving tonight, so forgive me if I take up maybe a little bit more time, but I do want to have the opportunity to go through this in some pretty good detail. So again, the Historic Preservation Commission has drafted a proposal to update the standards that apply across the entire historic district. As y'all know, Spencer does have a historic preservation program. The Historic Commission was established in 1994 and has all of the powers authorized to it by state statute. And so what that means is any property owner within a historic district in Spencer must seek a permit from the town before they can do any exterior work on their property. This is not unusual. There are hundreds of historic communities across the nation and dozens in North Carolina that have historic districts that were established under these exact same regulations. So this project came about for a number of reasons. A couple of years ago, there was a project that adopted what were meant to be streamlined, customer service friendly standards for the historic district. These are the regulations that apply to projects in the historic district. You have to make sure you're in compliance with those regulations before you do an exterior project. Unfortunately, although that project to simplify the historic process was definitely well-intentioned, it has led to unanticipated consequences and is something that we need to address. As y'all know, the 160D update on the state level has changed how appeals to HPC decisions are made. Whereas previously, an appeal to a permit decision by the HPC would have gone to the Board of Adjustment. Now that would go to, I believe, the Superior Court. And so there are a number of changes that have been made as part of the 160D process about what kind of legal exposure a town might have if a decision on a permit was appealed. And so one of the primary goals of this project is to make sure that we are minimizing the town's legal exposure to appeals and to make sure that our standards are legally enforceable and that they accomplish what they're meant to do, which is to maintain the special character of our historic property. So there are 4 things I want to accomplish, that the HPC wants to accomplish with this project. First, the update will clarify the town's expectations for the preservation, rehabilitation, and restoration of historic buildings within Spencer, including expectations for new residential or commercial construction and additions within the historic district. Right now, we do not have any standards for new construction for residential or commercial or additions in the historic district. And so we've been making do with what we do have, but it is very important that we get standards for new construction adopted, given the amount of new investment we're seeing in the historic district. Second, as I mentioned, the update will minimize the town's legal exposure to appeals by ensuring the HPC's decision can withstand judicial scrutiny. Third, the update will ensure that Spencer meets the qualifications for joining the Certified Local Government Program. This is a program established by the 1966 National Preservation Act, and which offers special benefits to participating jurisdictions, including grant funding, technical support, and training. I will dwell on that for just a moment. When I was the preservation planner for the city of Salisbury for 2 years, they are participants in the Certified Local Government Program, and I found that to be an indispensable resource. There's annual training, visits by state preservation staff, and other resources that I think Spencer could certainly benefit from if we were to join that program. But in order to apply for that program, you have to meet certain standards in terms of what regulations are locally adopted and other requirements that I do not believe we would currently meet. This project to update our standards would get us to a point where we could apply to be in that program. Finally, the update will help ensure that new investment in Spencer is encouraged by making the historic review process clearer, more transparent, and easier to navigate for both town staff, existing property owners, and developers. All right. So as I mentioned, one of the main reasons that we're doing this project is because the previous effort to streamline the process has made it very difficult for the HPC to make well-informed decisions. Without clear, detailed, and written standards, historic property owners cannot anticipate what the HPC's expectations may be when they seek a permit. As a result, this ambiguity causes HPC meetings to drag on, sometimes to midnight, as the HPC tries to interpret the limited standards that it does have. Once we have adopted updated standards, we will reduce that ambiguity and make the process run much more smoothly the way it's meant to work. There is also, of course, the risk that if a disgruntled property owner were to appeal an HPC decision, a court could potentially find the HPC's decisions arbitrary and the ruling unenforceable. And so in order to make sure that the town's enforcement process is strong, we need to make sure that we're making decisions that are strong and can be upheld. As I mentioned, the standards essentially eliminate any ambiguity about the town's expectations for what a property owner can and cannot do with a historic property. The guidance includes all the types of projects which typically come to the HPC, including driveways, fences, garages and accessory structures, signage, changes to materials such as wood, masonry, and architectural metals, exterior walls and trim, windows and doors, porches, roof, solar panels, mechanical equipment, new construction, additions, etc. And so at the end of the day, what this project will do is bring Spencer into conformity with what most historic communities do to make sure that they conform to the requirements of state law as regards how preservation programs work. I do have a section in my memo covering the regulatory background. I think I'll skip over that. But the gist is that the state statute authorizes local governments to establish preservation commissions, and those commissions are expressly empowered to prevent projects, that is, deny permits for projects that would damage or diminish the historic character of our district. I did also provide in your packet a link to an exhibit from the UNC School of Government talking about the importance of having as making sure that our historic standards are as clear and unambiguous as possible. The author of that article, Adam Lovelady, commented that North Carolina courts have ruled that when a Preservation Commission decision departs from the framework of historic standards and guidelines, that decision is arbitrary and will not stand. The author quotes from a court decision finding that preservation commissions have limited discretion and are not granted untrammeled authority to compel individual property owners in the historic district to comply with whatever arbitrary or subjective views the members of the commission might have as to how property in the historic district should be maintained and developed. The author concludes the article by warning if a decision veers from adopted standards and the evidentiary record, it may be overturned as arbitrary and capricious. So I cannot reiterate enough that this project is important to make sure that the HPC's decisions are not found to be arbitrary or capricious. All right. Are you with me so far? I still got quite a bit to go through. All right. So the next section in my memo, I compare the current with the proposed new standards. As I mentioned, our current standards were made to be as easy as possible for people to read. And I think there was an idea at the beginning to fit them all on one page. And so that led to only 10 standards that the HPC can use to make decisions on permits in the historic district. That is just not feasible. The HPC has so many different types of projects that come before it that it needs expanded, clear, and detailed standards for what can and cannot take place on a historic property. So the new standards expand that to 300 standards, which are organized into various chapters and subtexts. Now, before you shoot me, I would encourage you to consider a couple of points. The new standards are no longer than those found in most jurisdictions with historic districts. Salisbury has 241 standards, Raleigh has 298 standards, and Charlotte has 370 standards. These standards, although it may seem like a dramatic expansion of the town's regulations, is really not. When you come to the commission for a permit, the commission only needs to look at the standards that apply to your project. So for example, if you're putting up a new garage, you would skip to the chapter on garages, and there are only 12 standards that you have to look at. And those talk about what are the appropriate materials, the appropriate placement of a garage, and things of that nature. So the idea is that the reason that we have so many standards is that you can look only to the standards that apply to you. You can ignore all the rest, and it makes the decision-making process so much simpler for staff and for the property owner and for the HPC in making a decision on that permit. Additionally, the new standards are no stricter than the standards that are adopted in most historic communities. As we looked through models and templates to draw inspiration from, we found that Raleigh and Salisbury both had the type of standards we were looking for. And so our new standards are essentially modeled on Salisbury and Raleigh with a little bit of inspiration from Charlotte. And so, as I said, we're doing nothing that's not typical for a historic district. The new standards are not even necessarily more strict than the standards that we currently have today. The new standards simply establish a written standard to replace what in the past may have been an unwritten, implied standard or a consensus interpretation of an ambiguous. What you have to do when you only have 10 standards is to read into what that standard means. Over time, that leads to a consensus interpretation of what a standard means and how it may apply to certain types of projects. What this update does is that it makes it very clear for a new garage, this is the type of material we're looking for, this is where it should be located, this is how large it should or should not be, and things of that nature, so that you're very clear on what's allowed or not. The new standards provide essential clarity and detail regarding the expectations for the treatment of historic property. Additionally, the new standards are in fact designed to be user-friendly, so we keep that part. The standards are clearly organized into chapters and subsections for ease of navigation. Additionally, the new standards are designed to minimize the need to cross-reference between separate sections. That's another reason why they seem so long. The new standards also clarify where additional town permits may be needed, such as a driveway permit, fence permit, zoning permits, etc., and they provide appropriate guidance to property owners. The new standards will dramatically improve property owners' ability to plan projects prior to permit submittal. So the system we have right now essentially requires a property owner to contact me, and I provide support and guidance as they plan their project. Because we only have 10 standards, I get questions like, well, can I do this? Can I do that? I can't tell from the standard what the commission wants. Well, this will help them look at the written standards and plan their project, and then they can reach out to me and say, does my project meet the standards? And then we would look at the standards and make that decision. But right now, what we have is a process that virtually, it just isn't feasible for someone to plan a project ahead of time. They have to reach out for us and ask for guidance. And of course, me being selfish, the new standards improve my ability to provide that clear guidance and make sure that I'm providing the best customer support that I can to our property owners. So in short, the proposed standards will dramatically clarify the town's expectations for the treatment of historic properties and will simplify the project planning and permit review process for changes in the historic district for both property owners and town staff. And then I'll get into a little bit more of like what Mr. Blunt likes to do, is talk about the overall big picture, because I started with the big picture and I got into the details. I like to end in the big picture. Obviously, from a procedural, legal, quasi-judicial perspective, these standards are essential to ensure the town is in compliance with applicable law. But from a broader perspective, this allows us to think about our historic resources in a somewhat different way. Some property owners think they're a burden. And, you know, wherever you go, there will be property owners who either didn't know they bought an historic district, or they don't like the fact that they need a special permit to replace windows or to replace the roof, etc. But in the vast majority of times, property owners buy into the historic district because it is a historic district. They want to live in a place that has that special historic character, that has integrity of materials, and especially nowadays, as people are priced out of the large cities like Charlotte and Raleigh, those types of people are coming to places like Spencer that have somewhat more affordable properties, but which have the quality of life they're looking for. And many people do specifically look for historic communities because that's the type of place that they would like to live and raise their family. We should be thinking about historic preservation as an economic development tool. One of the things that we talk about a lot is economic development in Spencer. That's what we talk about with Salisbury Avenue restriping, with the comprehensive plan. And like I said at the beginning of this, we need to make sure that we're getting the most value out of our historic resources that we can. There's no cost to the town to maximize the value that we get from the historic district. But if we don't have enforceable, consistent standards, then the conditions in those neighborhoods can slip. As inappropriate types of changes happen, those districts lose their essential character. So well-maintained historic districts can improve pride of ownership and pride of place, stimulating additional reinvestment in properties in a virtuous cycle. And I will just say, for the record, that even with our old standards, we have had about 10 new houses built in Spencer in the historic district in the past year or so. So obviously the investment is happening, but we do need to make sure that especially flippers and people, like that, are not taking advantage of relaxed or lax standards and going in and flipping a house and changing things that shouldn't have been changed. Because then you forever lose the special characters of the district, which make it a place that people like to go. So finally, looking toward the next steps and the timeline for adoption. Tonight is the first time you're having the opportunity to hear this presentation. I would encourage you over the next month to carefully review the language of the proposed standard. It's about 55 pages total. We will be asking you to make a decision on adopting the standard at your July meeting, which will happen on July 12th. And so you have about a month between now and then to review the standard. And if you have any questions or concerns, those should be directed towards me. We do still have our subcommittee for the HPC working on this project. And so any questions or concerns that you have will be directed back to that subcommittee, and they will make revisions as needed. If the Board of Aldermen does choose to adopt the new standard on July 12th, those could become effective as soon as August 1st. What we would do in July is do a multimedia public outreach campaign to educate all of our property owners in the historic district about the new standard. We would direct them towards guidance and resources, as well as updated standards and permit information to make it as seamless as possible. Our goal is not to blindside the property owners on these new standards, but to make sure we invite them in so that they're aware and provide as much support as possible as they navigate this new process. And again, at the end of the day, the process is designed to be better than the process we have now. I guess the only last two notes that I'll make, just to review what the impact of this update is going to be. The adoption of the new standard would repeal and replace the standards regulating permitting within the historic district. All owners of historic properties within the district would be subject to the new regulations when seeking permits for exterior work. The new standards would become the legal basis for decision-making by HPC members in the context of quasi-judicial public evidentiary hearings. All proposed exterior work in historic buildings would be checked against the new standards, and permits would be approved or denied based on their consistency with the standards. Now, the version of the standards that you have is the bare bones version. Those are just the standards, the regulatory language. Before we publish the standards as a final document, we would be adding several additional parts to the document. Those would be a table of contents, an introduction, a summary of the procedures, a glossary with definitions of historic terms, project planning help and tips, and additional guidance, including links to external resources. Finally, the last version would also probably have diagrams, 3D renderings, and photographs to help people visualize what we're talking about. So I realize I've taken up quite a lot of your time. Do you have any questions about this project?
I want to thank you and the Historic Preservation Commission for doing this. I know this was a demanding job, and I think it is going to bring a lot of clarity to the process. If I have builders ask me questions all the time, I just say, you need to go talk to Tom Harris at Town Hall if it's in the historic district, because I don't want to give them the wrong one. So I think this is a big step. Thank you.
We have a question. I have section here called Exhibit A, which is the historic district project. And then I have page 2. Yes, Exhibit 3 is that the
Yes. So Exhibit A, initially we were going to print the whole 55 pages, but in order to save you space, what we've done is provided a link to the Microsoft version.
So if I have printed the link,
yes.
So that is full print.
Yes, that is the full proposed new standard. And then Exhibit B is the section of our current standard, which has the actual language of the regulation. So if you look at page 2 of the Exhibit B, the general standards for restoration 1 through 10 are the current standards that we make use of. Okay. Any other?
Yeah, just one really. the legal piece.
Yeah.
I know the planning board comes to us. They recommend we final yes or no, up or down. Does the Board of Adjustment is the planning board sitting as the Board of Adjustment, do they come to us, or does that go straight up to on a writ of cert if someone appeals?
I believe it would go to the court of Superior Court. Yeah.
Okay, so HPC and Board of Adjustment are both, which I think is pretty standard, right? They go straight to the court of it, to the
Yeah,
Superior Court,
my
sitting as
understanding
the
is that
appellate court.
the 160D has clarified that any appeals go to the Superior Court.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm talking out loud, so
Yeah.
I mean, this may be a bad idea. I acknowledge that it might be a bad idea. I'm asking a question.
Mm-hmm.
Since we're in the middle of this process, we're updating zoning ordinances and all that. I believe that is a choice in the ordinance to give that final up or down approval to that board, right? Or is it in the statute itself? Honestly, and
I'm sorry, could you rephrase the question? I'm not exactly sure what you're asking.
So does, in the case of the HPC or the Board of Adjustment, does it is that the final decision has to be with them, or that's our choice to give them that final decision?
The decision on a permit?
Yeah.
The HPC is authorized to make final decisions on permits, and then if there is an appeal to that decision, it goes to the court, the Superior Court. So y'all are not part of that process.
That's based on 160D.
Right, that's based on state statute.
It's statutory authorization, not us blessing that authority. That's my question. Okay.
So if the Board of Aldermen are authorized to establish a historic commission. Once the historic commission is established, that commission then recommends adoption of a historic district, and then y'all approve that historic district. And then, anytime an exterior project happens in that historic district, the HPC makes a decision on that permit. But before any decision can be made, standards have to be adopted. And that's what the part of the puzzle piece we're doing now is adopting standards that are better, much better than what we currently have.
So like stopping speed limit, take all the ambiguity out of it. Got a 45-mile-an-hour speed limit, obviously 6 miles an hour. No question about it. Kyle can't accuse the person. How can you accuse the person? Written term. That's the way HPC works. That's why it's so important to adopt the standards. You do get a lot of input because you do standards. If you think your standards are too extreme, now's your chance to modify those, reduce the imposition that they apply. This is your chance to get Alderman. Once you adopt those, their hands are full.
So the checks and balances for us is setting the standard. Okay. Or that the legislative action in our role. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I just wanted to clarify all that because I don't deal with HPCs up there. So this is new to me as well.
And I would reiterate that the standards that we're proposing are no stricter and no more unusual than what you would find in most historic communities in North Carolina. The language, so a little bit of, I guess, nerdy history. All historic regulations in the United States typically are promulgated from the Secretary of the Interior standards. That's in the U.S. Department of the Interior, the National Park Service issues the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic property. And that is a several hundred-page document which talks about, from the federal government's level, what are the typical appropriate ways to regulate historic buildings. And historic buildings are any building typically that is older than 50 years. And so as states and local municipalities adopt these types of standards, we do look towards the official guidance from the federal government how that language should be worded. We're not necessarily bound to those words, but over time, an approach has developed in how local government should regulate historical. And so these standards are very consistent with the best practice that you'll find across North Carolina. We're not doing anything unusual or anything.
If I could also add, I think Mr. Blunt mentioned about being in stone. Well, there is the ability to amend and modify if 6 months from now or a year from now there's a need to modify the standards. That's where you come back in again into that role. So it's not a permanent decision that's never going to be able to change.
Yeah, like with the comprehensive plan, consider it a living document, although you should feel generally comfortable with the version you adopt because that is the expectation that's set. But if problems arise for whatever reason, then you can feel free at any time to modify.
I've got two quick questions.
Yeah.
The first one, if there were a modernist home in Spencer, but it's located outside of the historic district, would any of this apply to that?
No.
That's what I thought. Okay.
These regulations apply only within the boundaries of the historic district.
Okay.
Or if the property owner of that modernist home applied to be a local historic landmark, they would also be subject to regulations.
Okay.
That's one of the things that I work on in Salisbury is they used to have just historic districts, but then we updated their standards or their process to also allow designation of landmarks. And if a property is designated as a landmark, they get a 50% property tax deferral. But I will say that is typically for very special properties of especially important significance associated with a historical figure or a exemplary demonstration of a particular style. We don't have a process to designate landmarks here, and unless that became a project that the HPC wanted to embark on, we wouldn't be able to do that now.
And the last question I have, is there an opportunity for citizens to have input into this if they contact you and they're concerned about something, especially residents of the historic district?
Yes. So the Board of Aldermen can make, you can choose whatever type of public input process you think is appropriate. There's not a requirement for a public hearing. There's not a requirement for publishing the standards. It's a legislative decision on your part. I would ask you what type of public input you think might be appropriate. And of course, you don't have to answer now, but you can let us know what type of public input process you think would make you feel comfortable to adopt these new things.
Thank you.
How many of these?
Well, for COAs, we get anywhere between 3 to 6 per month. Give you a perspective, in like Salisbury, there would be maybe a dozen a month. So it's pretty consistent with our size.
How many are not? I'm assuming maybe not many based on these standards.
So typically the HPC tries not to deny projects. What we do is we work with the property owner to modify the scope of the project to get it fit within the standards. And so typically that's a process of consultation and coordination with the property owner to explore alternatives to what they were planning on doing to make them get to that point, to encourage them to get to that point where they're doing something within the.
Somewhere in the last 2 years, I've seen pictures of houses showing where you could put this.
Mm-hmm.
Is that in the 160B, or is that part of the historic preservation?
The new standards establish regulations for placement of telecommunications and other types of hardware like that. For example, they
staircases to get into it.
Right. Well, that's exactly the type of thing that the Historic Preservation Commission looked at. So let's say someone wants to put up solar panels. We now have a whole section on sustainability and solar panels, and we encourage, for example, solar panels to be located on parts of the building that are not seen from the street. If solar panels are requested for a roof line on the front of the building, we encourage, it should, the color of the cells should mesh with the colors of the roof. It should be low profile, nothing on those big racks. So those are the types of things that the HPC looks at.
Is that some of that goes in?
We do have a part of our current standards talk to telecommunications and other types of equipment, but the language is pretty vague. So the new standards clarify and help project plans.
Okay, thank you.
My question is in reference to current residents and new residents, and as you say, the flippers within the HPC. Are they informed of these standards that they must comply with in reference to the guidelines when it comes to restoration of these properties and upkeep of them?
Yes. So in an ideal scenario, a real estate agent would inform a person who's purchasing a property, that they're in the historic district, and
right.
They would reach out to the town to inquire about the process. There are people who claim they don't know that they're buying in a historic district, and then with the help of our code enforcement, we see a project happening, and then we'll go out and establish contact with them to let them know that they're in the historic district and that there is a permit process. So we do say, for example, if I were to go out tomorrow morning and see that a project is happening without a permit, I would go to the construction team, identify the project manager, and begin that coordination process. Let them know that they cannot continue with any exterior work without a permit. Typically how that works.
Yeah, appreciate that, Kyle. My thing is, I just figured that'd be a very interesting question, because the reiteration of the education of that information for HPC registered residents, just in case, like you state, they're not aware, even though they were informed by real estate brokers.
Well, our HPC actually said that 2022 is going to be our year of education.
Thanks,
Kyle.
Kyle.
We're letting people know what exactly are the standards that they need to keep in mind.
Yes, sir. Thanks.
Which is why we requested a budget for publications, so we can make sure we're giving people the information that they need. Any other questions? Oh, right. So as part of the process is Steve, if he sees that there's a project happening in the historic district, he will let me know whether that, and then I check and make sure if there's any exterior work involved. That's how that process starts.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the only last thing I'll say is that if you needed printed copies of the new standards, we can make those available to you. But in order to take paper, you do have access to the digital version. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay, we are now into our budget workshop.
Yes, ma'am. Mayor and members of the board, this is an opportunity to have a budget workshop, and just to remind everyone of the process of how we got here. We had a budget workshop opportunity in the April time frame where we gave a preview of where we were heading towards the recommendation. A lot of that revolved around some of our ideas with the ARPA supplanted funds, and got some good feedback. You did have a special meeting on the 24th where we went through the budget recommendation, and we provided that, of course, to the public in a number of ways. We have scheduled a public hearing for Tuesday to receive public comment on the budget for the coming year, and once you hold the public hearing, you're welcome to adopt the budget at any time, although it does need to be adopted prior to the end of June because the fiscal year starts July 1. So ideally, based on feedback today and tonight, we would be able to provide you a budget ordinance on Tuesday for your consideration. Should be ready to adopt. And just to summarize, the proposed town budget for fiscal year 23 totals was just over $5 million, with about $4.8 million of that in the general fund, $169,562 in the Powellville fund. The property tax rate is recommended to stay at the current 65.5 cents per $100 evaluation. And one thing I wanted to mention this evening, in advance of taking any other questions you might have, is, and I shared this with you earlier this week by email, but one small adjustment that we are recommending staffing-wise within our police department, beyond what we were originally recommending, would be to shift from a total of 3 sergeants in our police department to 2. It would allow that third sergeant position that's currently open to be assigned as a detective at the MPO rank or grade 15. And rather than having 2 sergeants assigned to our patrol, we would maintain 1 and allow Chief Files' former position to be responsible for criminal investigations, school resource officers, and code enforcement, which would be a new responsibility for that position. And then the other sergeant's position would be able to be a detective to work with that the open detective sergeant's position. So that would provide some needed depth in having a sergeant and another detective working on investigations and provide future career advancement opportunities for newer officers. It would also provide more support to our code enforcement officer, and that is, again, a slightly different staffing summary, but a very small adjustment numbers-wise with the budget, so we're not recommending any changes in terms of the appropriations, but I did want to make you aware of that suggested change and see if you had any questions about that.
Okay. It looks like we're ready to move on. No questions about the budget. I know you got
Well,
it.
I mean, I'm
I'll be disappointed.
just trying to decide what to ask. I think Peter answered one of the questions I had the other day. So, capital outlay for the government body land, that's considerably higher. Could we talk about what the plans are, or do you have something in mind at this point?
Yes, certainly. That is a line at $50,000 that we're recommending, and it's higher because it didn't exist in the current year budget in that area. But the idea is that, we've talked some about strategic properties. You've heard from Mr. Blunt that we believe there are some properties out there that recreation-wise and achieving some of the vision that you've set out for connecting different areas in the community and providing recreation amenities. We believe having that amount in the budget would allow us to pursue purchasing strategic property potentially that could be used for recreation purposes, whether it's greenway access, parking areas for a trailhead. There's various opportunities out there that we would like to be prepared for budget-wise should those opportunities present themselves, that we could then bring back to you to talk about those various scenarios that may pop up.
I noticed that the line item for postage was down last year. Like that, a postage rate for them.
Are you?
I think it was a reduced rate.
Okay, so one that change comes from actually something fairly simple. We are currently renting a postage meter machine, we have determined that it makes more sense for us to actually just use plain old stamps, and we believe we could save some money in the process. So I believe that's, and John, correct me if add in wherever you need to, but I believe that's where that change came from with the postage.
That's correct.
Oh.
We may need to get a licking machine.
That wouldn't have any impact though on the newsletter that we sent because that's not paid for here.
The postage for that is incorporated into the that's in our contract services. Okay. Yes, so our contractor is handling that cost through the contract.
Right. And our property liability insurance is up somewhat. That's supposed to be building.
That's probably the primary driver on that.
One of the primary drivers. Insurance is just up across the board. With this building, yeah, this is a driver. So last year, you owned the building, but it wasn't an unimproved building. Now it's approved.
And one note about those amounts, we are. Well, I believe those were based on a quote for renewal.
Yeah, we actually got renewal quotes from the league, and what we have in the budget is based on those renewal quotes rather than an estimate.
And then there's other areas like when you're talking about health insurance costs for staff. Well, those are an estimate based on trends. Now, the last few years we have wanted to be conservative, and we programmed in, say, a 10% increase in healthcare costs. Well, we were fortunate that both the last 2 years, the premium costs wound up decreasing slightly. And so while we were continuing to budget, for an increase, we did not experience that, which is good. The way we had a meeting with our broker, we're not quite to renewal time. That comes in the fall, and they can only provide the rates within so many days of renewal. So it's a little bit of an estimate at this point. We think we did not go so far this year as a 10% increase. We programmed in a 7% increase, and so we believe that should cover. Again, it is an estimate. It could go either way. We'll hope for the best.
Okay, then we'll move on to the review of the June 14, 2022 agenda. Mayor Williams, we're doing the call to order. Do I have a volunteer to do the invocation? Okay, thank you, Pat. Okay. The approval of the minutes. Everyone had a chance to read the minutes. You won't put taking on the consent again?
It's certainly good.
Is there consent? Put those on the consent agenda.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can anyone think of any additions that need to be made to the agenda?
At this time, staff doesn't have any to recommend.
Okay. Or deletion? Okay. Recognition. Does anyone have any recognitions they want to make?
I would like to do recognitions for those people who were involved.
Okay, absolutely. Okay, any other recognitions that anyone make? I know we've mentioned the ballpark, Friends of 8th Street Ballpark several times, but I think we need to applaud them again for what they did on Saturday. And also the Community Appearance Commission for the picnic that they had on Sunday. up there at the community appearance card. And can anyone think of anything else? She won't do the 8th Street Parkway? Okay. That was a remarkable occurrence, and I was so proud of it. To look at back there and see the stands full, it was just like when I was 10 years old. It was fun. Okay. And I'll be glad to do the community appearance, community garden.
Madam Mayor, I don't know if it's truly recognition, but I would like to be sure that parents know that Central Methodist Church is doing the feeding program for the summer nutrition program, and that they are providing free meals for children from the age 3 to 18 on a daily basis, Monday through Friday, until July the 29th, with the exception of July 4th.
Okay. And we really hope that people will encourage their children to come. Bring your younger children, then the older children. I know I'll be working there tomorrow, and I think Miss Fledge worked there today, so we have other people working. But we do want to applaud Central Methodist Church for taking the initiative and getting that restarted here in the Central Community.
And then Bread Riot will be there on the 15th and the 29th of June, and then 2 dates in July. And the Bread Riot folks are bringing fresh produce, and that's available for anyone who wants to come to the meal site and get it. I believe the time on that is 10:45. I believe the meal program is at 11:05. That's when the truck gets there. Children need to be there, but the Bread Riot will be there for a longer period of time.
That's wonderful.
So, fresh produce from local gardeners and local farms that is collected by that group. I want to be aware of it.
And we may mention that again on Tuesday evening too, because there may be other people here. Okay, thank you, Mayor. Any other recognition? But we need to make sure that we congratulate our graduates. I'll be glad. Okay, we already talked about, we'll be conducting a public hearing about the budget for the town of Spencer at the meeting. So if you're interested in that, make sure you come. And if you want to look at the budget, I'm sure you can get a copy of it, or you can look it up online and see if you have any concerns, pro or con, that you would like to talk about. Consent agenda. Okay. Does anyone, do you want to go through these items one by one and see if we want to put it on the consent agenda? Okay, item 9, consider adopting the town's comprehensive land use plan. Regular agenda. Consider approving the design concept for restriping Salisbury Avenue. Regular. I don't think we want to do that. Consider adopting the text amendment section of the town's development ordinance. Okay.
And that's the one related to the murals.
Yeah.
Correct.
I'm excited, and I remember all those days. Consider adopting the resolution 22-0008 economic development grant policy. Regular agenda. Consider receiving a status update from staff on special projects. Regular agenda.
And excuse me, Mr. Morris is here this evening. He will be joining us by Zoom on Tuesday, and we'll be able to provide the update by Zoom.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Consider adopting the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget ordinance and the schedule and fee schedule. That's it. Regular or complete. Okay, regular agenda. Consider adopting budget amendment ordinance 22-012 Yadkin River Trailhead Grant. Regular.
So, if it's okay, that budget amendment is related to the $100,000 grant from the state that we heard about last month. We just were not prepared. You should be familiar with that. We kind of talked about last month. This is the procedure of the budget amendment to incorporate that in. We are preparing to go out to bid with the project. So this could be a candidate for the consent agenda if that suits you, but
That's number 15. Correct?
that would be yes.
Okay, consider adopting budget amendment ordinance 22-013 capital reserve fund.
This is something you probably will want to hear about on Tuesday.
Okay. And then consider resolution 22-009 interlocal mutual aid assistance.
So this is an item to extend our agreement with Rowan County for law enforcement services for another 6 months. I am happy to talk about this a little now for just a minute or so, and you can decide how you may want to address that in terms of whether or not it would be on the consent agenda. But okay. So, of course, the town established an interlocal agreement in December with Rowan County for law enforcement services. The agreement was for 6 months, so we're coming upon the expiration of that. Over the course of those months, our staff here in Spencer have covered about 76% of the shifts for the police shifts. Since the partnership started with the sheriff's office covering roughly on average about 12 shifts each 28-day period. Over the next few months, we anticipate the ability to cover even more of our shifts as we're continuing to bring folks on board, but also our school resource officers becoming available. And over the months of June, July, August, and September, we think that's going to get more in the 3 to 5 shifts a month range. So the need will go down, but we do think it's important to keep the relationship there. We have a few officers still in the field training mode that towards the fall will be able to coming on working on their own so that things continue to improve. But that's why we're asking for the extension, to get us, to allow us to continue to do that. Although again, it will be on a more limited basis than the 12 shifts a month they're currently providing for us.
So in reference to that, with the mutual aid assistance, now as far as the budgeting for that going to be paid, how is that going to be allocated? That's going to be less hours. How is that?
And again, yes. So the cost of this service has been covered through our existing budget because
I understand that.
Yes.
But I'm saying in reference to if we are to extend it.
So that would continue. It would continue to be covered by what we have budgeted for staff wise, with open positions that are not getting paid by the town. We have the budget available to contract with the county and cover the cost of service.
Okay, I understand what you're stating, but I'm saying so it wouldn't be the same amount as right now. You're saying that we're gonna be utilizing less. We have more officers that are going to be trained and ready.
Yes.
Hopefully within the next.
Correct. So we're seeing that we're going to go from approximately 12 shifts a month to somewhere in 3 to 5 shifts a month time frame. So that gives you the idea of what the decrease will be based on what we're currently.
So how many positions do we have open at this point?
We and if Chief File wants to come up, we currently have I believe 3 patrol positions. We have a sergeant's, but we have basically 2 sergeant's positions. But Chief, if you can elaborate.
That individual comes back, it's still going to be approximately 12, somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to 14 weeks in-house field training before they would be released to actually work alone. So that's the situation. We're trying to kind of stair step down, but we feel it's very important to keep that relationship open with the sheriff's office as far as some additional coverage. Obviously, when things come up, we're kind of running on the edge. So, say we had an individual officer that went out with COVID or some sort of an injury, we really need to have that as a backup plan in place, just because we wouldn't have the manpower to cover for an extended absence.
It's on an as-needed basis, is that correct? We're not obligated to...
Correct. Just effectively, about 3 weeks out, we provide a list of any available openings that we have where we don't have in-house coverage, and then the sheriff's office coordinates with their staff as far as who covers those positions.
So as far as the SROs right now, are they still
not currently, just because summer school is in. So they're obligated by the contract to cover summer school. So they're still working a similar schedule. But yes, to answer your question, as soon as they're out, they have already been allocated to fill all those positions below.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Mine does. Well, mine kind of is related to what you're talking about. School will start back probably first week of August. I'm sure you know when, but do you think you could give like a very brief rundown to our community on what we do to ensure school safety here in Spencer? We've got, grades K through 12. I think there's a lot of anxiety out there right now. I've never been in any of the schools currently or in the past where I felt unsafe. But I want the community to be aware of how they're locked and the officers that you send and what exactly you do. I think it might become
Right, definitely. Is that something you want to do now, or is that something you're talking about doing in the future?
You can do it at the July meeting.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think that would be. I think that's a good kind of plan. Obviously, we don't want to leak out all of our special secrets.
Don't give your secret.
But we do spend a lot of time. That was one of the things that I kind of instituted whenever I took over as interim, was that I wanted to increase coverage in the school. So our officers visit every day, and it's not only a thing about being seen in the school and as far as community. But it's the fact that if somebody calls in something on an A-Hall, our officers know where A-Hall is. So they can respond to that location at the high school and know where they're going. It's not, they don't have to go in there and try to go off a paper map. So definitely a lot of stuff that we do at the school to ensure that.
Thanks.
Yeah, the other part that I was going to ask about the SROs, and the school day is shortened for the summer. Shortened for the summer school.
Well, effectively, what they're running a 4-day week instead of a 5-day week. Okay. The officers are still spending basically the same time there, so they're working from about 7 o'clock to 4 o'clock. Just for students that are getting there early and students that may be there afterwards. I want to say there's about I'm going off the top of my head, about 15% of the regular student population is there, but obviously part of the contract with the school system is we still have to provide the same coverage regardless of the number of students that are there. So, and effectively, we don't tell them no, but we ask that our officers that are assigned to the schools try not to take off vacation during the school year and base it upon days that they're out. So with the availability of Friday, we've obviously opened that up to the officers if they want to take long weekends now and utilize vacation since they haven't during the previous school year.
Yeah, and I was going to ask about that next anyway, in reference to them taking some time off. I'm sure that they need some time as well.
Definitely.
Right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Chief Bob. Sounds good to say that. Okay, departmental reports, the regular agenda. Town manager report.
And, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, one note I wanted to offer to you is James Osborne is going to not be here on Tuesday. He is here this evening. If you had any particular questions for him, he's available now. Okay.
Come on up, Mr. Osborne. Glad you were here this evening.
All right. Yes, so as Peter mentioned, I won't be here next Tuesday. I'm going to Illinois for my son's wedding, so I'll be gone for a few days. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to ask any questions you may have. Not hold them until Tuesday when I wouldn't be here. And I didn't see on the agenda the liens that I put in my packet, but there are I believe about 4 liens that are pending confirmation.
Okay, well then that's an item that we can add to the agenda. So we may have overlooked that.
Where we were not putting it on the
Okay,
agenda.
I'm
With
sorry.
his monthly report.
So, but the action will be required.
They
Yeah.
would make action on the report. That would have to be required. Okay. But I can move it.
I do have a question. I'm trying to note. This a couple of questions. Mr. Osborne, how can we deal with overgrown trees or shrubs that block the traffic view when house appears to be vacant?
Well, I could reach out to the property owners if they're available. I can reach out to them and have them trim them back.
Thing. Right on the corner where you come out and take a left on Whitefield, and you can't see because it's overgrown.
Oh, I think you're talking about 314 North
I think
Roland.
it's 315.
Yeah, it's North
Corner of
Roland.
Jefferson, maybe.
I have to reach out to the property owner and have them trim that stuff back.
I just wondered if we needed to carry our first. That was all I had.
Okay, any other questions?
See the 119 Fifth Street, but all of it makes sense. Is that something we need to look at, or is that you're not serious now?
Well, as of right now, it's the country store next door to us here, the old theater, and I've reached out to the owner in reference to this particular situation because there are multiple walls that have growth coming through them. They recently cut them back off the alleyway over here, but it's grown back, and so I had a conversation with the owner this week and trying to provide a engineer's report on the stability of the walls because the bricks are actually bowing out from the growth, pushing from the inside out. And so my concern is that the stability of those walls are maybe compromised, especially with the new growth, and maybe pushing in directions that it wasn't pushing before. So I've requested some engineer reports on that from the owner. It's also a historic site. The owner has a number of years to get that brought up, and so I've been trying to push a little bit harder to get that moving.
Any other questions or comments, Mr. Osborne? Thank you, Mr. Osborne. I know this is one of the harder times of the year for you with the grass growing and the weeds.
It keeps me busy.
Yes, I know
and
it
it grows
does.
very fast.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
work. Okay, does anyone want to make a comment? Or do you want to hold that until Tuesday? Okay, well, let's see. Okay. And is there a need to go in executive session? Is there a motion for adjournment?
So move.
Thank you, Mr. Muhammad.
Second that.
Thank you, Mr. Hale. The meeting is adjourned.
Did you